the process of strengthening the assessment framework for the Consumer Protection Code. And then we will hear from MFR about the third-party assessment, as well as from 60 decibels about the Lean Data Consumer Protection Survey. And there's some time for questions after each section, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time for all your queries as well during the appointed Q&A at the end. Some housekeeping. The session of today will be recorded, and we will share the recording together with the presentation with all attendees afterwards. As I said, there's some allocated time for Q&A during the webinar. Please, for any questions, use the chat box or unmute yourself to ask your questions. And then we hope the session will be informative for all of you. And before we start, I would actually like to start by asking a question to all of you. Let me get this up. Oh, 1 second. Rebecca, could you maybe launch the poll for me while I explain it to the others?
Yeah, it should be launched now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So please, could you all indicate how strongly you agree with the statement that says off-grid solar consumers are well protected from financial, product, and service risk? So please indicate whether you strongly agree with this statement, somewhat agree, maybe you're not sure, or you disagree, or you strongly disagree. So let's give it a minute for everyone to fill it out. And then while the results will come in, I'd like to give the word to my colleague Rebecca to respond to the results and give some opening remarks before we continue with the session. So please, Rebecca.
Thanks, Buck. Yeah, so hopefully you can see the results on your screens now. So it's a bit of a mixed bag between somewhat agree, not sure, disagree, and a couple on the strongly disagree. So I think it's telling in itself that, you know, I think there's a mix of kind of opinions here, and I think, you know, I'm probably agree with all of you. There's areas where the industry is doing well and has really shown improvements, and there's still areas where, you know, there's improvements to be made and still steps to be taken. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and I'm excited on the back of this to be launching, you know, both the third-party assessment and the new lean data survey for consumers. So these are really the next steps in strengthening how we as an industry address this problem and improve standards of consumer protection for the users of off-grid solar products. As an industry, you know, we are still young, and I think we can see in the results of the poll there, there's you know, there's improvements being made and still there's gaps to be had. But since the inception of the Consumer Protection Code in 2018, many companies, investors, and other stakeholders have taken quite significant steps to improve practices and protect the outcomes for consumers. The customer is, of course, central to everything that we do as an industry, and it's key that growth objectives are aligned with customer interests. And this is why we've expanded the assessment framework for the Consumer Protection Code. Our aim with this is to help companies better understand their performance in this area, uncover those blind spots where we may not be mitigating risk to consumers as well as we could, and focus on continual improvements. We also want to provide the tools and resources for investors to safeguard the impact of their portfolios, and whilst having and providing independent objective information to help them give targeted support and capacity building for companies. So I'm excited for this next stage and to support the companies in taking the steps to improve practices where it's most needed. So I will hand back to Puck, who will give an overview of the updated framework, and then we'll hear from MFR and 60 decibels. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Yes, as said, I'd like to go a bit more in depth and explain how the two new services are complementing the current assessment framework. So the consumer protection framework is not just only a tool that helps companies to measure, monitor, report their performance against the consumer protection principles. It is just as much helping companies to reach financial sustainability and impact goals by really putting these consumer interests at the top. As everything that a company does, consumers are central in it, and by evaluating how well their needs and interests are met, as said, this will help the reaching financial sustainability. And as pointed out by Rebecca, the assessment framework helps companies to identify the strengths and gaps and have a focus on improvement. Then again, the consumer protection assessment framework provides as well a standardized method to promote good practice for both investors and other stakeholders in the sector. Then, as probably some of you already know, the current assessment framework is looking like this right now. This means that after companies have made a commitment to the code by sending us a letter, they will be published on our website demonstrating that they strive to meet these minimum standards of good practice in consumer protection. Afterwards, they are required to send a self-assessment to us to undertake a self-assessment and let us know every 12 months. And through this self-assessment, the companies can really review their performance against the principles and the indicators. And for this, they can use the self-assessment tool. This self-assessment is, as the name implies, done internally. And now, beyond the self-assessment, we have two new services. And the first one that I'd like to address is the third-party assessment. And this is a robust objective assessment that is conducted by an experienced rating agency. And the results of this third-party assessment include an in-depth analysis, a narrative report, as well as an action plan for companies. And it's really focused on this continual improvement. Next to that, as said, we're launching two new services today. So the second one is the Lean Data Consumer Protection Survey. And this survey is really focused on the consumer side of things. So putting the consumer voice into consumer protection. And it does so by collecting rich consumer-focused insights that is aimed to validate performance against the principles. And the survey can be undertaken by either the company itself or by a highly experienced impact measurement company. Then, we are very happy that you are all joining us today with the official launch of these new two services that are now available to companies and investors in the sector. And yeah, these services are now available through our through the providers that we have accredited to deliver these services. So the third-party assessment will be delivered by MFR, who have a wealth of experience in client protection assessments in the MFI and mobile money sectors. The Lean Data Consumer Protection Survey is made available by 60 Decibels, and 60 Decibels is speaking to thousands of off-grid solar customers each year. And we are very lucky to have them with us today to share more about these new services. So I would now like to give the word to Lucia Spaggiari. She is the Innovations Director at MFR, who will give you more details about the third-party assessment. Lucia, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Book. Can you please confirm you can hear me well?
Yes.
Excellent. My apologies, first of all, for some reason, Zoom is not collaborating with me today, and so I have the pleasure to call from my phone. And it's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to share exciting news, indeed, as anticipated by Book. First of all, for those of you who may not have known me before, this is Lucia Spaggiari, Innovation Director at MFR, a rating agency specializing in financial inclusion and access to energy. When we first heard about Gogla's plans to strengthen the consumer protection code and to do the additional step of moving from self-assessment to a third-party assessment, we thought this was very important and a sign of maturity of an industry which, yes, may not have all practices perfectly in place yet, but that for sure shows commitment towards improvement of practices. And this also benefits sometimes from an external eye that can come to company and provide independent review of the practices, be a critical friend, and also share some advice from good practices seen in the sector or in parallel sectors. And so it is very exciting indeed to let you know a bit more today about the consumer protection third-party assessment that is offered by MFR, accredited by Gogla to do so according to the Gogla Code of Consumer Protection. You already probably are familiar with the code, which is comprehensive and includes transparency, responsible sales and pricing, good consumer service, good product quality, personal data privacy, fair and respectful treatment, as well as an overarching governance principle. And in a nutshell, the third-party assessment is a step in the company journey and investor journey alongside the company in having a complete review and gap analysis of what is already done strongly and what is done less strongly in terms of governance, policies, but also practices and field reality, to then make an action plan and rank actions in an order of priority to improve practices. Please note, this is not a rating and this is not an audit. In our view, it is not these types of tools that the industry may find most interesting given the stage of development. We are in a moment where we believe the priority is on diagnosis and actions to improve, so that we are positioned as a critical friend in this sense. The third-party consumer protection assessment will be important for companies to show their commitment publicly towards the implementation of consumer protection, regardless of what is the starting point. Undergoing this exercise is already a very serious sign that we are committing and working towards constant improvement. It will be beneficial for companies to gain insights on risks and opportunities, and it will make life easier, both to companies and to investors, in the due diligence piece that is relative to the do no harm component, and specifically with the consumers. Plus, the vision is to also constitute a credible self-regulatory piece that can strengthen the credibility of the sector towards regulators as the industry grows bigger. In terms of practical information, the assessment is available to a variety of types of companies and business models. What is needed is for the model to be about solar energy off-grid. It can be units, it can be appliances, it can be cash, it can be payable. We recommend and make this service eligible to country operations with more than 3 years of activity. And it is also highly recommended and an eligibility criteria that the company has committed to the Consumer Protection Code and completed a self-assessment. Please, to learn more, don't hesitate to let us know and to visit a dedicated page on our website. It will be a pleasure for GOGLA and MFR to share more technical information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. We'd like to give a short moment for any questions to Lucia or to us in the meantime that you have about the third-party assessment. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat or unmute yourself to ask the question out loud. If we don't have any questions so far, I'd like to continue with, there's one question coming in the chat I just saw. Lucia, maybe you can answer this one. Will the assessment result in a score or other indicator of compliance relative to others? Would you be so kind to answer the question?
Thank you, Puck. Right. So a score is a good question. Thanks for that. And it is always appealing, right? So the score is available in overall and also by principle. However, please, this is not the focus of the exercise. Yes, you will be able to see your score and the score principle by principle and indicator by indicator, so you can potentially benchmark yourself. But first and foremost, this exercise is about establishing a baseline over which you can improve, rather than necessarily being a stage where you demonstrate your level of achievement compared to others. Still, it is useful as a measurement tool indeed, for example, to track over time your progress in increasing the implementation of the good practices established in the third-party assessment. And it is useful as an internal management tool for you to keep track of the progress of your teams in implementing the action plan. Or another example may be with impact investors also supporting the industry with TA programs that include components to strengthen the consumer protection side, it may be interesting to see the impact of a TA intervention into the average score of a portfolio of companies, likely to be also attributable to the intervention of the technical assistance. So yes, you can measure, but please focus is improvement rather than necessarily receiving a stamp. We will get there, but this is still, in our humble opinion, a time when most efforts are best invested in improvement.
I think there's just a follow-up to that from Anthony as well, Puck. So in each of the 6 areas, the consumer protection principles, there will be an indication or assessment of the company's level of compliance or lack thereof. Yeah, so I think that in summary is what. So to expand a little bit on what Lucia said, so the third-party assessment has really been built on top of the self-assessment tool. So we use that as a starting point. So what you already get in the self-assessment, but of course that's subjective and done internally. It's a similar kind of framework. It's kind of got a lot more detail, a lot more kind of evidence basis to it. But the tool used is similar as well. So if you're familiar with the self-assessment and the kind of spider diagram, looking at where you sit with each principle, that's also something that you'll be able to get as part of the third-party assessment.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. I also see there's a question about the costs. I think we will get to that at a later stage, or maybe we park that one for now. Then I also see a question from Andrew that says, can the assessment be done online with a controlled platform? Yeah, maybe I can answer it, but maybe Lucia, you want to take this one, as you can say what the process entails.
Right. Look, in COVID times, to certain extent, we were all forced to do some of what we used to do on the field remotely, right? And to some degree, the lesson we all more or less learned was that much of what we believed wasn't possible remotely, we discovered that yes, it was possible remotely. However, we also see that quality is not the same, to be honest. So because this exercise, yes, it is about governance, principles, policies, but it is most importantly about practices. And when you work in emerging markets and with humans, there is always a difference to be expected between practice and policy. The key aim is to understand the materiality of risks and opportunities in the discrepancies between practice and paper. This is the reason why field is absolutely necessary, and not only field, but head office, shops, managers, consumer-facing staff, focus group discussion with customers to establish that relationship and that trust that is necessary to dig deeper.
Thank you very much, Lucia. We will now move on, but if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we can cover them still at the end. I'd like to introduce Kat Harrison and Edwin Kimbaya from 60 Decibels, the director and senior associate, who will tell you all about the Lean Data Consumer Protection Survey. Please, Kat, can you share your screen, and then the floor is yours.
Yeah, morning. Hello, everyone. Sorry, we're on different times. You need to stop sharing your screen. Sorry, Puck, before I can.
Yeah.
Thank you. So hi everyone, lovely to see lots of names that I recognize. We'll just take a few minutes to talk through the lean data tool we developed for consumer protection. I think most of you are familiar with 60 decibel, but just a very quick intro. We're an impact measurement and customer insights company. We focus on listening to voices of end users, customers and clients, and we do this mostly through remote surveying, using our team of over 1,000 research assistants across 70 countries of the globe to conduct phone-based interviews in local languages. So for the consumer protection work, 60 decibels and Gogler partnered to build a first of its kind consumer protection insights survey tool and approach, really focusing on gathering data directly from consumers. As Puck said, we wanted to ensure the customer voice is part of the journey to understanding how the sector is faring in delivering on the consumer protection principles. So we used our knowledge, our experience, and our passion for the off-grid energy sector to translate the consumer protection principles and code into survey questions that could be asked of end users. And so a thanks to the working group and the funders who reviewed and input into that discussion and the initial question set as well. So we delivered lean data projects with 3 companies using the survey tool to hear customers' own experiences through phone surveys. From here, we finalized the question set based on the pilot insights and are making this available for the sector. And we'll develop a benchmark for the sector once we conduct 10 projects, but a little bit more on that later. So we know that often we talk about the big numbers, the percentages, the performance, the results, but at the heart of all of this is the end users, the customers, and their experiences, their voices, and them sharing with us what's happening for them. There's such an opportunity for us to build better systems to scale and grow if we know what's working and what's not working. For example, this gentleman here in Kenya, I'm not very educated, and the language the company used in the product manual was a bit too technical for me to understand, so I've not used it. So over to Edwin to share a bit more about the indicators and some of the results.
Thank you, Kat. Yeah, so as I think Lucia mentioned earlier, yeah, so here's an overview of the 7 themes, main themes of the consumer protection, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. So what we did is, as Kat mentioned, we translated these themes into indicators and subsequently developed questions that we that made the survey that we developed with the off-grid customers. To share a bit more about some of the indicators that we developed. On transparency, we captured feedback on awareness of e-contract terms, clarity of contract language, access to transaction data, as well as receipt of payment and balance notifications. On responsible sales and pricing, the second theme, we have indicators around whether a customer received support to assess their payment ability, any repayment palette that they are going through, and any impact of these repayments on their household food consumption. On the theme of good customer service, we included things such as awareness of product warranty, product disposal, challenge rates, whether customer service information was shared with the customer when they bought the product, and whether the company has sought feedback from customers at any point during the journey that the customer has bought the product from them. On good product quality, we assess whether a customer received a manual and whether the language of the manual was easy to understand. We also look at how easy it is to make payments and whether customers received support to install the product. The principle of fair and respectful treatment includes questions around reposition procedures, resolution of non-payment issues, and privacy of sensitive discussions. Personal data and privacy was more limited, as many of the indicators here around adherence to the local laws and regulations by the company, which the customers may not really know about. But we did ask about awareness of personal data that is collected and stored by the company, which also falls under the principle of transparency. For governance and management, this theme is best suited for company level assessments rather than questions for customers, so it isn't included in the tool. So lastly, we included lean data core questions, provide insight into customer profile, experience, and satisfaction. Some of the indicators may actually give us insights into like the customer experience with the consumer protection principles. We included indicators such as the gender, age, income level measured by the poverty probability index, whether customers are rural or urban, their household size and education level. We also included some questions on fast access product financing, access to alternatives, as well as net promoter score and value for money. So I'll give you a flavor of some of the insights that we saw from the data. I'll talk through just a few from one indicator, from one of the themes. So these aren't final results. We want to collect more data with more companies before sharing widely. So we know that there is sensitivity around some of these. We're one of the people that responded to the Bloomberg article that I'm sure you're all still cross about. So what Kat mentioned earlier, we conducted these pilots between January and March of this year. Our team of trained researchers conducted 895 phone interviews with off-grid customers of 3 participating companies in Kenya. So we randomly selected who to interview from active and inactive customers, customer contact lists that were shared by the companies. These customers had bought a product from the companies in the past 12 months. In our analysis, we looked at for differences by gender, product type, and other filters. So yeah, just looking at this chart. So this chart shows just 5 of the transparency indicators. The red line indicates the average results, and each of the dotted line is a company. So we've calibrated the indicators so that the higher the score, the more positive the result. So the dream would be that to have the red line and the company lines be the largest as possible, like in the shape of the biggest pentagon possible. What's great here is that it's quite easy to see visually the areas that are going well versus those that might need some more focus. For example, overall, there doesn't seem to be quite high awareness of price variation conditions. Of course, one thing we appreciate is that not all indicators are created equal. Some are likely much more critical than others. At present, we've not weighted the indicators in any way, but this might be something we're looking to do in future to build a consumer protection index, which provides an overall performance score. What is useful, you'll see, is the range in results by company. In areas where the average is low, but companies are grouped quite closely together, these may signal that a broader sector approach is needed to understand and tackle this challenge. Where there is large range in performance by company, these, I think, might imply that it may be an area that the companies have more strong influence, like on the outcomes, and in the biggest opportunity for them to take action and have an effect on the outcomes. It could also be useful for funders to signal where technical assistance and support could be valuable. I think an example of one such area is here is the clarity of contract language. You can see that the dotted lines of the 3 companies' performance are further spaced out, showing quite different results. So I'll hand it over back to Kat to wrap up on how we've developed this work into a service to you and others and how you could use it. Thank you.
Thanks, Edwin. Yeah, we really enjoyed learning with the companies that were part of the pilot. So thanks again for being part of it. But just to show what all this means or how you could access it, we developed 3 levels of service to give a bit of flexibility. There's the full service. This provides a full view of your performance against the Gogla Consumer Protection Code. It includes all the indicators and themes and is a comprehensive view of what's really going on. The basic service is a simpler snapshot version. You remember Edwin said not all indicators are created equal. So we identified which ones felt the most critical to customer experience and have put them into the shorter version. This version could be used for like a first priority check if you're kind of new to this space, and or for maybe regular tracking and checking in. And then lastly, there's an add-on module. If you're undertaking a lean data project, perhaps part of our new energy initiative, there's an option, there's a 4-question option to kind of slot into the overall survey. That would be a really quick temperature gauge that gets some of the most critical indicators included. So you can find out more about which indicators are included in each of those service levels in the web page we made. on that link. As we said, we shared the question set there, so it's publicly available. Everyone can have a look at it, play with it, read it, use it. On that webpage, you can also find the service offering we created. So that's what's included in each service and what it costs. Though Puck has a bit more information on a funding opportunity, which is exciting. What's next is building this benchmark. So the benchmark will provide insight for performance across the sector, putting company results into context. You know, are you outperforming, underperforming against peers? Provide an opportunity then to look into the policies and practices of the highest performing companies, what we might be able to learn from them and share with those those companies who perhaps aren't doing so well as recommended actions. The Gogla team, have more to share on this funding coming up. And just one thing to say, I've totally made up the numbers here. It's just a quick visual guide. So these numbers don't mean anything at all, but gives an idea of how you might see what the average is, what the range is, the buttons at the bottom. So lastly, to bring us back to the customer voice again, explain why it's so important. I'm sure I don't need to, but we think listening to end users is critical to really understanding what's happening for them. That's our whole purpose of being. We also believe that insight provides ideas for how to improve design and delivery and be even more effective in terms of sales and growth. I mean, this customer here would like a balanced message and she might pay more often. Sounds like a pretty great outcome to us. So having those voices and hearing those experiences can be just really helpful for guiding kind of changes you might want to make in your company. So handing back over to Puck, this type of discussion now, feel free to pop any questions in the chat, and even if we don't get to them on this call, we'll make sure we get back to you. Reach out if you have any questions. Edwin and I's emails there. We'd be really happy to discuss more.
Thank you very much, Kat. Well, you already gave a teaser about our funding opportunity, but first, I'd like to tell a bit more on how you can improve the consumer protection in your business and why we think this is such important. I'm sorry. So what are the benefits of going beyond the self-assessment in the current assessment framework? We believe that it demonstrates commitment and willingness to improve consumer protection in the industry, and that you will receive public recognition as it will be shown on our CP hub, the same as we do now with our self-assessments. As was pointed out, I think multiple times, there's really a focus on improvements, and this is not only for the benefit of consumers, it is just as much for the benefits of companies and investors. Then independent information will be able to support the due diligence processes and decisions that will be made by investment organizations, and as well be able to better demonstrate company performance. And then, as was already pointed out a bit by Kat, we'd like to really evaluate the company performance against this industry benchmark that we will be developing after we have a satisfied amount of new surveys and third-party assessments coming in. So you will be able to check this against this benchmark. Then another exciting part of this presentation. So we are very happy to share that with thanks to the funders of the Gogla Consumer Protection Program, we now have the availability to offer co-funding to support the first adopters of these new services. And for each service, we have 7 co-funding awards available that will be up to an amount of 7,500 euros. For each service, for both the third-party assessment and the Lean Data Consumer Protection Survey, there are 7 co-funding awards. Then the co-funding is to be used to offset against the total cost of the service for the companies, and the remaining cost can be either made up by the company, some investor funds, or a mixture of both. That is to be decided by the receiving company. Then I'd like to give some example to give a feeling on how this could look like. There was a question before on the third-party assessment. So the total cost of the third-party assessment are 16,800 euros plus travel costs if applicable. Then this would say that with the co-funding of 7,500 euros, the remaining costs are 9,300 euros. And as said, the manners to pay this remaining cost can be either by the company, the investor, or a combination. For the Lean Data Consumer Protection Survey, as there are two services, the co-funding amounts are also a bit different. For the full service, the total costs are $20,000. That is a bit different with the as it is in dollars, but the co-funding amount is still 7,500 euro, which is approximately $7,820, which would mean that the remaining costs is, as you can see, $12,180. For the basic service, which costs $10,000, the co-funding will be 3,000 euros, which is approximately $3,130. And that would mean that the remaining costs are $6,870. So this is just to give you an idea on what the costs of these two services would look like, yeah, what the options are for paying these remaining costs. Then what are the next steps? First of all, we'd like to encourage you to make sure that your self-assessment is up to date. Then the links are shared by both Lucia and Kat and Edwin from the web pages of MFR and 60 decibels. Do check them out. There's lots of more information out there about the service offering. Oh, there's one missing. Yes. Please do not hesitate to ask any questions to either us from the GOGLA team, the MFR team, or 60 decibels. Do as well use this opportunity when we have all teams together, but otherwise do not hesitate to send an email to either one of us. Then please do initiate company and investor discussions if you feel this is necessary. And when after all you decided that you're interested in the co-funding, please submit your expression of interest form online. The link is shared in the presentation and can also be found on the GOGLA website. And if you don't need co-funding, you can access both services directly from either MFR and 60 decibels if you go to their respective web pages. So those are the next steps we have for now. And I think we have around 10 to 15 minutes left for questions. Let me check the chat. No. So please, again, do ask your questions in the chat or unmute yourself. Yeah, we'd really like you to use this opportunity when we have everyone together here to ask anything you have in mind. So please feel free. Well, before there was some time needed when the questions came in, so let's just give it another couple of minutes.
Can I ask a question which people on the call might be interested to know? We've had some discussions around it about So we've talked about creating a benchmark, which is essentially the average performance, but is there a plan to create a target? So there's a kind of, everyone wants to achieve a certain level of performance, or more it's just for now about kind of what's actually happening on the ground? Because I think there might be more call for that as different kind of regulations and policies come in place in different countries. Would love to hear your thinking on how we make sure we're achieving rather than just necessarily sort of measuring what's happening.
You want me to say that?
I wasn't sure who the question was to, but yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And I think at the moment, as Lucia said earlier, responding to whether there's kind of certification and compliance measured and rated, I think for the moment, the focus is on understanding where the strengths and the gaps are, focusing on the improvement rather than kind of achieving a particular target. So initially, the plan was to do the third-party assessments, and then in the future look to see how that can evolve into a certification or sort of rating scheme that would provide targets, you know, a target performance for different levels. At the moment, yeah, we're not there. I think as a sector, it's important that we just first of all understand what we're doing and kind of benchmark performance on which people can compare themselves against versus, and then kind of track their improvements over time as well. I think as well, what's important to say is that we've got two really good and kind of services that I think are going to be really influential in helping the companies improve. And what we also want to understand is over the next phase, and this is part of why we're co-funding the next 7 of each services, is how the sector kind of responds and what the uptake is like for the services, what the value is to companies and their investors, and how all of this new insights and assessment can be used to sort of help foster improvements. So I think, yeah, so I think there's still a lot of learning to be done before we get to a point where we kind of set a target. I see Lucia also want to come in and add something there.
Fully agree. Thanks a lot, Kat, for the interesting question, and I'm sure we will get there, but maybe over time. And I agree, Rebecca. Let me also share as an example, you know, this is about consumer protection, right, which is the end of all we do. At the same time, there is a lot of linkages with quality of operations overall at the company. And, you know, if you think about getting the incentive scheme right with your consumer facing sales agents or employees, if you think about ways in which potentially the assessment of customers' creditworthiness can be better estimated, this clearly has a lot of positive externalities to the portfolio quality and hence the quality of the operations overall of the company. As an additional example of the advice for now, potentially, of investing the efforts of companies that have a lot on their top list agenda. So focus the efforts on indeed improvements and testing and fine-tuning, so that beyond the gap analysis, there is really action towards strengthening the systems potentially, and then we can be more ambitious.
Thank you, Lucia. I saw there were 2 other questions in the chat. So whether the assessments will be made available to the public or whether there is disclosure at the discretion of the company. Well, I can just take it. Yeah, you want to go for it, Lucia? I saw you.
As you wish, Book. Yeah. So it is meant to support due diligence, so that companies will be able, if they choose to do so, to share with selected third parties, including potential investors. If they wish, they will also have an option to share the results of their assessment on the Atlas platform. And if they do so, they will benefit from benchmarking with aggregate results, and investors will have a one-stop shop to find the information they need on due diligence. So not publicly available, but definitely there are channels to simplify the lives of companies and due diligence and investors for due diligence purposes.
I would just add to that yeah, so like Lucia says, the results, yeah, personal, individual company results, the plan is not to share them, but we do intend to create this benchmark with the aggregated results when we have enough. We also will, if the company agrees, add the company logo to the Gogla consumer protection web pages after a third-party assessment or the lean data survey has been undertaken by the company. There won't be any information about the outcomes or the results of that. It will just be that it has been done and the date that it was done. So this is really so that the company themselves can demonstrate and receive that recognition for having kind of taken on board and really taking consumer protection seriously, which we hope will help them with their investor relations as well, as we do currently with the self-assessment after they've made the declaration.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Lucia. I noticed there was one other question in the chat, whether a company would be able to apply for co-funding for both the third-party assessment and the lean data survey. I would say the answer is yes. Although for the co-funding, we will reserve some spots for small and medium enterprises or companies in underserved markets. And we will try to have a range of companies that can really benefit from the co-funding. So I would encourage all companies to express interest, although of course there's no guarantee that it can be used for both.
Yeah, I just add to that as well. I think when Puck went through the next steps, I think it's really key to go away and have a look at the full information from both services, from MFR and 60 decibels. And then also, if it's a investor company, something that you're looking at to support, have that conversation with the companies and really try and understand at this point in a company's life cycle. Maybe they've been trying to improve consumer protection for a while, or maybe it's relatively new to them. Which of the two services would best suit them at this moment in time? Because I think there's a lot of kind of information and output from both of those services, and it might be that both of them are complementary to each other, but it might be more beneficial to kind of undertake them at different points in a company's journey, maybe 12 months apart, to really kind of see how things are improving, and to kind of just get more insights into how that journey is unfolding at different points. I don't know if Kat and Lucia, you also want to say something about that as well, and how you think they could best fit in and suit the companies at different points in their life cycle as well.
Right, sure. Look, there is no rush, and each company is best placed to choose the best timing for the different exercises. What I'd like to add is that if your company, because this is a dynamic sector, if your company is potentially considering to merge or acquire a fellow company in the market, then maybe, you know, you could.
Lucia, I think people are struggling. Well, I'm definitely struggling to hear you, and there's a few other comments. You're very, very quiet.
Sorry, can you hear me better now?
A little better.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so if there is plans of mergers and acquisitions or transfers of sale, then what we recommend is that either the entering company or investor can do an assessment of what it is buying, or maybe it is not the best timing to conduct a third-party assessment in terms of company's life cycle.
Yeah, and I think from our side, although the lean data consumer protection survey is the third element, I honestly think the MFR third-party assessment or the lean data assessment, talking to customers, either could come first at the same time, do it regularly. I think it's about kind of, as Lucia says, where you are as a business, what other things you might be focusing on, and where the opportunities might be. So feel free to jump in and ask us any questions, but I don't think it necessarily has to be a path that one happens before the other. They're really complementary to each other. So lots of insights in kind of different ways.
Yes, thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and we've almost come to the top of the hour. So with that, I'd really like to thank Kat and Edward from 60 Decibels and Lucia from MFR. And again, to all the attendees, do let us know if you have any questions. Do reach out to 60 Decibels MFR, check out their websites. Yeah, we're very much looking forward to this new phase of the Consumer Protection Program, and we are happy to have had you here today. And with that, I would like to wish you a good rest of the day, and I'm looking forward to engage with you in the future again. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers, Pak.
Bye.